welcome back. It's AFEX time now, getting a little bit away from the central bank and all the policies and all of that. So now let's do AFEX, and we see that total turnover for the week ended the 20th of January was almost 90%, but we do have details now with Eniola Akindele. He's an analyst in market data and research with AFEX. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Eniola, good morning. So can we have the details of the trading for the week ended?
Good morning. It's nice to be here. We saw a bullish performance across our key indicators in the last trading week. Our total turnover increased by 89% to close out at 6.3 billion naira. Also, our volumes traded also was more than double, moving from 6.3 million to close out at 15.3 million. Also, our total number of deals increased by 18%, moving from 208 to close out at 246. Across our key indicators, we saw that our AFEX commodity index, however, increased by 2.4%, moving from 492 basis points to close out at 504 basis points. Our export index, however, declined marginally by 0.49% to close out at 244 basis points. For volumes traded on our exchange last trading week, we saw that maize and soybean account for over 80% of the total volumes traded. Across our commodity prices, maize happened to be the top gainer, increasing by over 15% to close out at 246 naira 97 kobo per kg. Also, our soybean increased by 2% to close out at 342 naira per kg. Also, clean sorghum increased by 8% to close out at 284 naira. For cashew nuts, there was 8% gain to close out at 510 naira per kg. For cocoa, there was marginal increase of 0.1% to close out at 1,898 naira per kg. And our clean sesame, however, gained 4% to close out at 1,150 naira. However, the price of our paddy rice declined by 3% to close out at 317 naira per kg. The prices of our other commodities were flat. To know more about us, kindly visit our app www.africanexchange.com, and to trade on our platform, download our app COMEX on Apple Store and iOS Store. Thank you.
All right, Eniola Akindele, thank you so much for giving us details of that. So we're still staying with AFEX now, but let's see another side of the conversation, talking about strengthening Africa's food system. And we have joining us also from our Abuja studio, Yusuf Ogumbi, head sales operations with AFEX. And we do know that the shift in global commodity market has exposed the vulnerability in Nigeria's food system. According to a report that was released, there's a growing imbalance between food supply and demand of the growing population, putting upward pressure on prices, which we have seen and felt. The issue of inflation, food inflation, is right there staring us in our faces. And developing a holistic approach to mitigate food insecurity and improve the shocks to climate change is well, priority, especially for AFEX. That's why we have Yusuf Ogumbi. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's just get into it. From this report that we have, we see that Nigeria's inflation number seems to be on a steady rise in the past 2 years, even though we had that, little break in December. One of the chief contributors, obviously, being food. How do you think that AFEX can help bridge some of those infrastructural gaps plaguing the agricultural sector?
Yeah, good morning, and nice to be here again. I think we've said this time and time again. Bridging this gap in the infrastructure is not a one-man activity, not just something AFEX can achieve in and of by itself. I think it's something that we all have to work together to achieve. AFEX, yes, we continue to participate in this space and continue to contribute our quota. And in order to cover for these deficits, we have put in a number of infrastructure when it comes to storage infrastructure, processing capabilities across the country, and also deepen our logistics capability to move commodities from across the country, whether you're going from north to south or south to anywhere you are going to in the country, you are able to deliver on these commodities. But I think it's more important to communicate every now and then with all the stakeholders, especially as we go into the season, that infrastructure is an everyman job, is everybody's responsibility at this point. And it's important that we recognize this infrastructure, infrastructure surrounding storage, surrounding road infrastructure, surrounding processing capability to reduce post-harvest losses. All of these are critical for the sector, and I think AFEX has done some good work in providing storage and processing capabilities, especially in mitigating these deficits as we have it currently.
I'm happy you mentioned the post-harvest losses, because the report also shows that 1/3 of all food produced globally never gets to the plate. It's lost in the production chain or wasted once it reaches the household. How can we nudge producers and consumers to make more responsible choices, to avoid or at least reduce this for the sake of food security?
Yeah, I find it quite, and I think every other person finds it quite appalling that 1/3 of the total food produced globally does not get to the consumer, final consumer. It's either lost at post-harvest on the farm, it's lost in storage in some instances where you don't have storage capabilities, or it's lost in transit to the consumers, or it's even lost at the consumer location. So there are two sides to this coin. On the one hand, you want to ensure that the producers have the understanding, the training to make sure that they harvest properly, they have access to storage which AFEX provides, to store the products that they've produced, and then we reduce this post-harvest loss on their side. Also providing effective logistics, moving the commodities across the country with the right type of logistics. And at the end of the day, there's also the other side of the coin where you talk to the consumer as to how they handle food. You don't buy in excess of what you don't need, and all of those things. So it's critical that we have those two double-edged sword, as you might put it. So on the one hand, you are providing training and infrastructure to the producers so they are able to produce what they are producing effectively and store them appropriately, and also move the commodities in the right manner. But on the other hand, you're also looking at the consumers. You're providing the training they need. You are providing the support to them, advocacy especially on that front, so that we reduce food wastage on that front as well. So those two angles are critical. On the one hand, infrastructure and training and logistics is critical, and on the other hand, you're also looking at advocacy to provide understanding for consumers as well.
All right. Well, it's good that AFEX is taking these steps, but we still have that knowledge gap to be bridged. How do we do that when we look at the activities of the food system?
Yeah, as funny as it might sound, a lot of producers are not even aware of the extent of losses that they incur at the end of the day. Typically, they just look at the net returns that come to them, net revenues that come to them, and as long as they are fine with the net revenues, they typically just move on with it. But I think training, knowledge provision across board is critical, and with the extent of the formalization of the commodity sector that we have now, that we're beginning to see as it continues to deepen this formalization, you continue to have more structure around that producer angle, where there's a lot of knowledge provided to these producers. There's a lot of engagement with them to ensure that this knowledge gap is mitigated, we reduce it. And on the other side, we have other entities that are also working with other partners other stakeholders in the value chain to provide the knowledge advocacy that they also need. So knowledge gap is a major problem, but then you also have to look at it from the two sides of the coin, like I mentioned earlier. You're looking at it from the producer side, which I think the more we formalize the commodity sector, we formalize the agriculture sector, you continue to have that knowledge being spread around. And also on the consumer side, you are looking at advocacy to help the consumers understand how best to manage the food they buy to avoid all these wastages that we see here and there.
So, of course, we do have outlook and predictions for the year 2023. Achieving it is another thing. What was your plan, achieving some of those predictions?
So for us, the last 3 years have taught us that the food system is a very critical segment of the overall economy. In many countries, we've seen the importance of food security and the adverse effect of food insecurity come to the fore, and governments have taken it seriously across the world. And I think going into 2023, if you look at the events that have shaped that have shaped this outlook going into 2023, you would realize that a few things are very critical. Access to markets via long-term contracts with processors, and ensuring that farmers, producers have access to this opportunity to sell their commodities in a very formal, effective manner. They're able to leverage storage as well, and at the end of the day, get better pay for what they've produced. This is critical. So access to storage is critical. Access to market is super critical, and this helps them to improve their own revenues. Aside that, we think as well, going into the year, we've faced a few challenges coming into the year. If you look at the flood incidences that we saw at the tail end of 2022, you would infer that it's now important that we deepen our capability. So production going into 2023 is critical, and we are working as always to deepen these capabilities. We are able to provide the inputs to the farmers, organize them in more structured, effective manner, and ensure that they have access to the market to sell the products at the end of the day. So if I were to summarize, I would say, so access to storage, double down on our provision of such, access to markets via long-term contracts with processors, and then access to these inputs that they require to produce whatever they want to produce going into 2023.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Yusuf Ogumbi, the head sales operations with AFEX. We certainly wish you the best in following up with those predictions.
Thank you very much.